We are delighted that you're joining us for another podcast of Wake Up Aligned, and it is the podcast for chiropractors where we get to talk about chiropractic lifestyle, and topics of interest. You can contact us through our email, and that is mailbag@amcfamily.com.
Well, welcome back to Wake Up Aligned. I've got the one and only Dr. Tara Horrall in the studio with me today, joining me for this show. So welcome, everyone. Dr. Tara.
Hey there.
It's always good to have you back in here with me on these shows. And folks, I don't know if you know this, but Dr. Tara moved back to her hometown or home state. And
not even, actually.
Yeah, not even.
I'm a newfound foreigner in a new state.
Yeah, but you're like you're
20 minutes from home.
Say you're a golf shot away.
Yes.
So, but miss having you down in Jacksonville with me at the AMC Aligned office. Dr. Tara always kept it light and motivating. Pretty interesting that's going to be our topic today.
Look at that.
Is, folks, what motivates you? And I think we're going to dig down a little deeper as to what motivates you, what should motivate you, because you've got to have motivation each and every day for something. So we'll drill down on that here in a minute. But before we get into that, lots going on in Aligned. You know what, folks? You probably don't know this behind the scenes. If you have been enjoying this year's summits and the material and the way that the classes have been constructed and the deep dive we've been doing, I mean, you, Dr. Tara, talking about motivation, Dr. Tara has a full roster of people that she mentors and practices she works with, but your impact has gone way beyond those that are on your individual roster, because you have moved a lot of needles, a lot of practice needles this year, because Dr. Tara is the coordinator of all that topic and those subject matters and kind of the architect of it all. So I say thank you for all the listeners. I'll say it on their behalf, Dr. Tara. I know a lot of work, and it is. I would pull the hair that I have left, I would be pulling it out if I had to coordinate as much material as you do. But fantastic.
I appreciate it. Well, the topic is motivation. So you're talking, and you're saying you've moved a lot of needles, and my mind says that means we've changed a lot of lives, right? Changed a lot of chiropractic practices, and hopefully positively impacted a lot of families, right? Chiropractors and their families and their patients' families as well. So it's funny that we're talking about motivation, because it's pretty easy, I think, once I start talking, to figure out, moving the needle is important, right? I mean, obviously they're here to grow their practices, but for me, it's always been far more interesting to see how their lives change, how those doctors change, how their families are changed and improved. And I think a lot because I know that happened for me because of AMC and the way that we talk about the system, but the way the principles and patient communication and who I became by using the system, and how that impacted and improved my life, how that changed the lives of my children that I didn't even have whenever I started and joined AMC, and how different their lives are because of what I learned here. So thank you and Dr. Owen for pouring into this company for years. Did I mention it's been years?
You can just go ahead and say decades if you'd like. Yeah. But that's the maturation process of a mentor, because it takes a microphone and a webcam to be a consultant and a coach, a guru, mm-hmm. right, these days. But to be a true mentor is, I'm not talking about moving, you move the needles. When I say move the needles, you're You're thinking about bottom line cash numbers. Is that your motivation, folks? Are you, and I don't mean to say shallow, but when I was much, much younger, there was a time that my goal or my expectation might have been a certain car, and I'm sure it was. There was a time, certainly a certain boat, right?
No.
That could still be my motivation, come to think about it. But that's just your reward.
Yeah.
If your motivation, when I say the moving the needles, your motivation is the money or the bottom line, that is fleeting, and you'll quickly find out those things don't satisfy. Right? I've gotten to the point at my age, my motivation is I'm at a point in my life where I realize I have more in my rearview mirror than I do in my windshield. And I just want to go across the finish line with no tread left on the tires. And the only way is to live that motto that I wrote down. I wrote that chief aim now 25 years ago. Over 25 years ago, I really drilled down to my motivation. What's my chief aim? Because there's different things, folks, than having goals. Goals in life are good. We need them. You got to have them striving. But what's your chief aim? And developing and figuring out your chief aim takes time. I can write a set of goals probably before the end of this show, right? While you're talking, Dr. Tara, I'm going to write some goals. Okay. But to develop my chief aim, that's a little deeper. Figuring out what is a driving force motivator that makes me get up and overcome the bad days just as much as enjoying the good days. And that is, I found it, I simplified it. A chief aim should be a little simple, but can be profound. Is in the end, all that's left are the lives we've touched and to what extent they were changed. So each and every day, I try to keep my focus off of myself, and I try to be aware that the most important person in the world is the person in front of me. Now, if that happens to be my daughter, and I'm pouring into Michaela, and I'm trying to connect with her, and I'm trying to develop her, I'm trying to inspire her, lead her, whatever, right? Let her grow into the woman that she's going to be. Okay? But then when I turn around and I'm getting my truck and I take a phone call and maybe Dr. Tara calls me, then the most important person, she should feel on the other end of that phone like she's got my 110% attention, and how and what does she need? How can I provide for her? How can I work for her? How can I do something for her? How can I improve and develop? Same goes down to it. I've got snacks in the room with me right now. Ryan. Hopefully Ryan feels like when he walks in and it says, Tom, do you have a minute? And whatever I'm doing, that he's catching on to, that I'm tuning into what can I do for you, Ryan? What do you need? The most important person right now is you. And that's that motivator. In the end, all that's left are the lives we've touched and to what extent they were changed. Don't be in the service industry if you can't get that. And that's not a motivator, because you're going to be miserable and you're actually going to make a lot of other people miserable if you're in the service industry and you don't have the heart for service.
It's a tough one for me to hear, because we've been talking to some folks that actually one person in particular that works a lot with search engines and all that kind of thing. And he's telling me that one of the most, like, the reason a lot of people nowadays go to chiropractic school is because they're searching and finding that they can make a lot of money in chiropractic. Like, it just really boggles my mind, because that's so far from, I'm just not motivated that way, right? But I also know that many of them have never been adjusted before they went to chiropractic school. So they don't have that drive to change people's lives. I mean, I was 17 years old, pain shooting down my arm every time I ran more than I want to say it was probably half a lap. And I ran the 400, which is basically a 400-meter sprint, right? So when I'd get to the last straightaway, that arm just was on fire. And I went to the chiropractor. It got better, but I stayed on for lifetime wellness chiropractic care, not because the chiropractor they explained it, that was what I needed to do. But I felt like I could think better, right? I slept better. I didn't handle stress like other people did that I saw around me. I was happy-go-lucky, and that was what I wanted more of, right? Not only that, I got rid of urinary tract infections that I'd had basically on a month-to-month basis for about 3 years at that point by the time I was 17, taking all the antibiotics and all the things, and I was told that I basically was prone, that was what I was stuck with. Basically get used to being sick because that's just how it's going to be for you. So when I say my life was changed, I can go to the point where I can say my life is saved by chiropractic care, because that was, we have to talk about how many years ago I brought it up, right? 20, 30 years ago almost now. Ew, that's scary.
Yeah, welcome to the family.
Exactly. But getting adjusted, at least every month for 30 years, that's a different kind of lifestyle, right? But do I get adjusted? Yeah, at times I may have symptoms, but I get adjusted because, my motivation for getting adjusted is that I handle stress differently, right? If I wait until I have symptoms, we're in trouble. But it's what's best for other people for me to get adjusted at this point, right? So, that was my motivation for going to chiropractic school. So looking, again, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make a good living in chiropractic. It certainly could be done. But giving services for the wrong reasons, because it makes $1 is a different conversation, right? If it's not something that the patient needs and that helps the patient, that is a major issue for me. And again, I don't necessarily think that's a problem with everybody, but if that's your main motivator, like you said before, you get to somewhere in the middle and you think, is it really worth it? And at some point, I think those folks have to come to a point where something different motivates them, or there's a good reason, right, why 50 to 60% of the population that go into chiropractic school aren't there in 5 years. And if that was the motivation, if that's the most searched thing, as far as students go, I can certainly understand why we would have that problem on the backside.
Well, you work with a lot of students.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, folks, I don't know if you realize, Dr. Tara heads up the whole aligned student program on all the campuses. And you know as well as I do that the minority now are the people with chiropractic miracle stories. Yeah. People don't go to chiropractic school anymore because of a chiropractic experience. Mm-hmm. They're going because they went to a career day and they learned that this could be a great outlet. My best friend, Dr. Orville Stuckey, his son, Wyatt, is about a year from graduating. And I believe it was Wyatt that told me this just recently. Somewhere just within the last couple of weeks, somebody was talking to me about there's somebody that's that's like 9 months away from graduating, and they've never been adjusted, and they're going to be a chiropractor, and they've never been adjusted, and they're not planning on getting adjusted. So I'm thinking, now you and I know, right? You can have all the thoughts upstairs that you want.
What do we call it? The educated mind,
yeah,
right?
You can have all the educated mind. We know what that's going to do in the practical world of, in a clinic setting. That person is kidding themselves, right? They're the old, like you and I know as the Dallas Stroshines of the world. They're kidding themselves.
It'd be terribly hard to relate to a patient if you've never been one.
And you're not going to have any value in what you're offering. Right? So where's your idea? Look, on a podcast, I can't get into a class, but there's 4 components that you can't deny this. You can't avoid it. And I'm not talking about just chiropractic, but in chiropractic in general, you better have a strong identity. You better know what you are. You better have a value system as to what that value is worth. You better expand the belief systems, not just belief in chiropractic, but your belief systems in business, finance, all those components, and your purpose. Probably your biggest one is your driving purpose. And we're sitting here talking about, we just jumped into this show and started talking about motivation, right? Well, what's your motivation? Well, what's your purpose? If you're sitting there and listening today and you're in practice, if I picked up the phone and called you and you can't tell me and identify, well, what's my real purpose? Well, I want to get sick people well, right? I just want to get sick people well. How many times have we heard that? That must be taught like on orientation day at chiropractic
I don't know.
school.
I feel like I need to hide under the table like you're pointing fingers at me or something.
But I just want to get sick people.
Just want to save the world.
That's a very general, it's not a really big purpose. The reality is in aligned, and you and I are in this, we're in this world. This is what we do, right? We see the potential in people that they don't see in themselves. You and I recognize it and see it in their eyes when we first meet them, right? And whether we meet them as a student or they're 5 years into practice and they're about to give up, either way, we see that potential. And many times, Dr. Tara, how many times have we seen over the years that they were in a great market? They actually, whether we were involved or not, they're in a great location. It's laid out right. They get a pretty good number of new patients coming through the doors, whether through marketing or whatever. You and I have seen it, right? They come on board as a line member. They start utilizing the processes, and it doesn't trigger real fast. In other words, they don't explode. Then all of a sudden, folks, they come to the Thursday night chiropractic big idea classes, or they hang out and they go to lunch with a person like Dr. Tara or Dr. Lisa Bigley, right? And they tune in to something they've never tuned in before, and all of a sudden their identity as a chiropractor and their beliefs is Dr. J.P. Whitaker. We all love J.P. He's a great example of that. He practiced for 15 years without really knowing what he was or who he was. And then he started hanging out with the likes of Dr. Todd Osborne and Dr. Henri Dalliez, and he started asking questions. And he started finding out, well, this chiropractic there's something different to this. Wow, there's more to this thing. What happened? His concepts expanded. His value system started going up. His identity, he realized who he was and what he is. Now, for those of you that are, we said earlier that you got the small goals and you just want cars and houses and you want the bottom line money. What's happened to J.P. Whitaker's office, his practice? It's tripled in size, and he's in the same market. He's in the same location. He's utilizing the same system that he was 10 years ago, and yet now the practice has tripled from what? Different motivation, different purpose, different mission statement, chief aim.
Different concepts.
Exactly.
Well, I find I talk to people all the time, right? Obviously, I mentor several clients, and we talk about, well, why are we doing something, or why are we not doing something? And I had a conversation the other day with someone who was afraid to do something. And I think every time someone comes up, right, we come up against that fear. If you don't know what motivates you, then it's really hard to push your own buttons and get you past that. Not that your mentor is not always there to help you do that, right? But, we don't necessarily, I'd love to work myself out of a job, right? To mentor someone to the point where they understand how to motivate themselves when things get difficult. And so we started talking, right? What was the question that I asked him? Well, what's your purpose? Just like you talked about a minute ago. Well, if I say, what's your purpose? And within, what's your mission? What's your point, right? And within, there's any sort of a pause, it's a pretty good indication that we're on to something, right? Because that'll stall someone out faster than anything else. It's not just that you have an incorrect motivation and say that there is one that isn't correct, right? Because especially when people are just starting or when they're just starting to grow their practice, they can be motivated either away from the negative, right?
Mm-hmm. There can be urgency.
Right. Away from, I just don't want to, be in the red this month or whatever. I don't want to go bankrupt. I don't want to, rely on my spouse's job to be putting money into the clinic or whatever it may be. And then there's positive motivation. And I think a lot of times, right, folks can get stuck in being negatively motivated for whatever reason, right? Staying out of trouble or whatever it may be, they can get stuck in that. So have you seen that through the years, and how do you generally work someone through that process?
Well, I think what you're asking me is, how do you shift somebody that their motivating factors are negative and move them into a positive?
Mm-hmm.
Probably more than what I can teach, I can't
Sure.
necessarily share on the show. But so many times that the negative is almost a habit.
Yeah.
It's a way that they've channeled or created their concepts and their way of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
that it almost becomes their identity. It becomes a characteristic that they just tend to focus on that. And that'll probably trickle down and affect their relationships, the type of relationships, who they'll have relationships with. In other words, if you're a negative motivator, you're going to hang out with people that have negative motivations. Right. So
it feeds the cycle.
Yeah, it feeds the cycle, and it's probably more than I can probably unpack here on this show. But I know on other times I've mentioned creating a line in the sand moment.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are not going to get out of that kind of deep cycle that have that without a line in the sand moment. And I can't make that happen. I know, in fact, what am I talking about? I'm sitting here looking at Dr. Tara. She's come to my office before and said, and described somebody to me and said, Tom, will you work with them? Will you work with them? And I've looked at you and said, Dr. Tara, if they don't want to change, then no, I'm not going to work with them. Mm-hmm. And my, anybody that's ever wanted to work with me or be mentored on those kind of components, it always starts with that right there of, okay, stop playing games. People just go from one self-help book to another self-help book and to another one, and then they go to a rah-rah seminar and so on. You got to learn, you got to break the cycle. Mm-hmm. Are you really serious about having a line in the sand moment? And if you are, that you find somebody, a mentor like a Dr. Tara, that will stand beside you and say, all right, I will not let go of your hand, but if you let go of mine, I am not chasing you. You got to get somebody to that point that they really want to change that cycle of that negativity. Now, figuring out what a motivation is beyond the urgency, because you mentioned that a minute ago. You said, well, some people's, their motivation is, I just don't want to be in the red this week.
Right.
Oh, there's a lot of that. Okay. There's a lot of, otherwise you wouldn't have the failure rate that you have in chiropractic. And I'm not talking about just, you have a lot of scarcity.
Sure.
That's a scarcity mindset. I'm just trying to get by. Mm-hmm. That's the 60%ers, as Joe Charbonneau used to describe them. right? There's 60%ers and there's 27%ers. You don't want to hang out with them. That means 87% of the population are walking around in the doldrums or below, right? So just think about that. 8.5, almost 9 out of every 10 people that you know are not people that are going to set standards to inspire you, that'll lead you and direct you to those kind of levels. So first and foremost is understand that scarcity creates urgency, or it can. So what I mean by that, Dr. Tara, in our world, in chiropractic world, that's somebody that they're doing just enough to buy pizza on Friday night.
Yep.
They're getting by, and then they come across Dr. Tara. They meet Dr. Tara. They come to an Align meeting, and they come on board, and they get serious. There's an urgency. I want to grow. I want to get past this. But then this is where we're talking about. It's a different level of motivation that we're trying to drill down to on the show here. Because you can have a motivating that, look, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired because I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Mm-hmm.
And those people, they'll move out of their way for a short time, and they'll churn and burn with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people that I'm just going to throw figures out. Let's say they're doing $15,000 a month, and they got a $12,000 a month overhead.
Right.
Okay. Are they making a little bit of money? Not much, right? You can make more.
Sometimes.
You can make more working at Chick-fil-A than doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But these are the people that will come along, and they'll jump, and they'll all of a sudden they'll be doing 25 or 30,000. But you and I have done all the demographics. We've done all the work. We know what we know. We know what should be produced out there, and we'll sit there and see it in them, and we'll go, oh, there's no reason whatsoever in this market, in that location, in what we're seeing that we're working with, this practice should be doing no less than $50,000 or $60,000 a month. Now, I'm not, okay, again, folks, we're talking about bottom line. That's the bottom line. I can move needles. But to move that needle and to see that kind of money, money is nothing more than the shavings of a good carpenter's tool while constructively at work. That's my motivation, is to figure you out, right? If you ask what my motivation is, I like people. Mm-hmm. I like developing people. I like working with people. I like getting the best out of the people. But I can sit there, and you have too. You can see it, and you can sit there and go, "Oh, this practice has no business doing anything less than 50,000. There's more than enough people. There's not enough chiropractors."
It's not even that. I look at them and I'm like, "That's a well over $1 million chiropractor."
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but these same people that you and I see the potential in them, that's our motivator. We see it. We want to develop. We want to help you become the best that you can be. Mm-hmm. They'll get to 25 to 30,000. Now they were doing 12 and 13 or 15 for years, scratching a living, and all of a sudden they jump. They double, and they get to 25 or 30. And what do, Dr. Tara? They settle in.
Stall out.
They stall out, and they get what's called comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
All right, folks. So if your drive is money, then you will only drive until you get comfortable. And once you get comfortable, now where's the motivator? Now where's the fun? Where's the urgency?
Dr. Owen called that a rut.
Called it a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with both ends kicked out. Right? But I want to bring that up. It's because you and I have seen that countless times over the years, right? They get up there and they get comfortable. The pressure comes off. They got a little bit extra money. They're putting some money aside to buy a dream home. Well, what kind of dream home? Right? I can keep going down. If it's toys and boats and homes that you want to buy, well, you can never keep up with the Joneses. There's always going to be something better. But it's that's who I'm talking to today. Is we're talking about motivation. What's my motivation? Right? All right, talk about a guy like me. What's motivating me? I've been doing this, been running chiropractic offices. Let's see, it's 2020. 2024. What am I? I'm approaching 38 years, 35 years. I'm right in that ballpark. How many more houses and boats and cars and, how much more investments and stocks can I own and all?
Eventually, there's nothing new under the sun, right?
It has nothing to do with any of that, right? What's my motivation? My motivation actually goes back to where I started 35 years ago when somebody was investing in me, right? And I know you wanted to do a show one day of just talking about our chiropractic influences.
I'm thinking of mine too.
Right? So that's where mine is. I'm trying to figure out who's the next Tom Owen. Because back then, I had to figure out who was the next Dr. Tom Owen. Who was the next Bill Harris? Who was the next Roy Sweat? Who was the next Bert Pierce? And I'm naming, who was the next Jim Revels? Who was the next Larry Troxell? Who are these people that were willing to carry a torch for the people that went to jail to give us the right and the opportunity? There's something much bigger at stake here, folks, than any money and boats and cars and houses and comfortable life. What's your comfort got to do with it? There are there's millions and millions of people. There's 350 million, thereabouts, 320, 330, 350 million people in this country. There's only about 38,000 practicing chiropractors, about 50,000 licensed. 38 to 40,000 of them are using that license for anything. Now, what percentage of that 38 to 40,000 even identify with real chiropractic as to what I know chiropractic as? The lifestyle I've lived for my entire breathing life, that chiropractic. I'm walking in a value and identity and a philosophy of chiropractic that's dying.
Well, there's 2,500 chiropractic students that graduate every year. And from what the schools are telling me, there's 2 of them that are espousing, right, that type of chiropractic. 2. So if you consider that they graduate, 300 students each per year, you're talking about 600 maybe out of 2,500 per year that are really, that's just that they understand what chiropractic really is. We're not even talking about if they know how to communicate it and if they know how to get into the right market and they're going to make it because they know anything about business, right? So, same sort of thing. I remember exactly where I was. So if you went to Palmer, Iowa, anyone out there, there was this Mexican restaurant. I think it was called Azteca or something like that. I think it was up on like Brady and 53rd or something like that. And I was sitting there with Frank Bemis. I don't know if you know Dr. Bemis or not. I was sitting there with Frank Bemis, and I was within probably 3 months of graduation. And he said to me, I'll never forget it, and it hit me like a freight train. He said, "What do you want to be in chiropractic?" Like, I don't know. I just spent the last 3.5 years of my life, or more than that, right? If you can consider undergrad, to be a chiropractor. I just want to be a chiropractor. But I had to actually sit and think about what I wanted to be in chiropractic. And like a flash, I don't even know where it came from. Never thought about it in my entire life. Like a flash, influential came into my mind. I had no idea what that was going to look like. I had no idea that years later I was going to be speaking to thousands of students a year or talking to chiropractors and being a mentor for people. But Innate knew, right, in that moment, Innate knew that I was to be a positively influential chiropractor. And, you talk about being motivated, right? Every day, you got to get up and look in the mirror and say, all right, am I being, right? How can I be a more positively influential chiropractor today? I don't know why that's motivating to me. It's just built in there somewhere. But, there's got to be something, because it's not easy to get up and drive or fly or wherever, to all of these schools on a monthly or bi-weekly, sometimes weekly basis, when you have kids and a spouse and a house and other people that you're mentoring. If there's not something in there, some button, right, that you learn how to push in yourself, it's pretty easy to get tired or to not be your 100% whenever you get there, or not give whatever it takes to influence that next generation of chiropractors. So I look at people who I mentor and I think, man, where is it, right? What is it that, because I know they have it, and I know innate and Holy Spirit just waiting to scream it in their ear, like was done for me, or like Holy Spirit did to me years ago. They're just waiting for somebody to ask them, what are you going to be in chiropractic? What kind of person are you going to be? What kind of impact are you going to make?
I know this is about motivation, and folks, you were in the studio with me today. You could see that this isn't motivation. It's passion.
Mm-hmm.
That's purpose and passion in her voice, tears welling up in her eyes over it. But there's another point about this that I don't want to do a show about motivation, because somebody out there is going to get motivated, and it's always it is just going to be money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But here's another one that's just as dangerous as money, is ego and pride and arrogance. What we're talking about here is it's motivation of service.
Yeah.
And it's not about you. Okay? So we're going to just go ahead and nip this thing in the bud right now. We're not talking about creating and identifying of who's the next,
right,
Bill Harris that's gonna.
No.
And Bill Harris was Uncle Bill to me. Okay,
sure.
So I'm not trying to, but we're not. I'm not talking about an image. I'm not talking about an ego. I'm not talking about a leader that thinks it's all about them. We don't need just another person with a microphone and a webcam to be the next guru. I'm not talking about arrogance and being. I'm talking about service. Talking about figuring out what's your motivation. And it's okay. By the way, I want to give permission before we wrap this up. It's okay that your motivation is you don't want to be the next Tom Owen. All right? It's okay that you don't want to be Dr. Terry. You don't have to have that. But what is the motivation? It cannot be just monetary, and it cannot be about being comfortable. It's got to be about giving your absolute best every day. And whether your motivation is your kids, your family, it's okay. That's a good enough motivation. But does it drive you? Does it drive you beyond your comfort? And that's what we're talking about here, is success is never comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? My dad wrote a book that said, success is never final, failure is never fatal. And you know what? He had every right to write that book. I don't know if I know another man that saw the highs and the lows of life as much as he did. But, I think about my dad, and, he's been gone 6 years now. And I think about him. Was he a perfect man? No, he was a broken man in many ways, just like I am. But he was the most steady, strong-spirited person I've ever known, I've ever witnessed. He, and it didn't matter if he was on the top of the mountain with me, or if he was at the low of lows where all his friends had left him and he had lost everything and he started over at age 58, right? He had the 3 letters IRS had come into his life, and it's a long story about that. I can do another show on that sometime. But the point is, it was never about him.
Mm-hmm.
It was always about some bigger drive, bigger purpose. And it was always about people. For him, it was about people and it was about chiropractors. Notice that I didn't say chiropractic.
Mm-hmm.
Dad had a love for chiropractic. He absolutely walked it. But he had a love for chiropractors. What you have overcome just to decide and be a chiropractor.
Mm-hmm.
He firmly believed what I believe. I believe every chiropractor has gone through the hassle to be a chiropractor. You deserve to be successful because you're against the grain. I love people that are against the grain. I love rebels. You're a rebel to be a chiropractor because you're going against the grain of the world, right? You're going
Totally different way of thinking.
It's a total different way of thinking. So we can go on and on and on about motivation, right? But motivation is, yes, should you have affirmations? Absolutely. Should you have exercise and develop your quiet time and your innate? Absolutely. Should you have goals? Sure, you should have big goals, and you should have consistent goals, and you should have monetary goals, and you should have developmental goals. But all behind it, what's your chief aim? What's that motivating factor that drives you on the days that you don't feel like doing it compared to the days you feel like you're on top of the world?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, really, when it comes right down to it, it's what motivates a patient to get better, right? What's your need behind the need? What's the need behind the need for the clinic to grow? And once you figure that out, what is it that we say about chiropractic? Get the big idea and all else follows.
Get the big idea, all else follows.
And pretty much that's what we're talking about. Once you...
Yeah, and let's wrap it up on this. I mentioned success is never comfortable, right? And it's riddled across the board. There's so many of those people that they get a hold of something as powerful as the AMC system, right? And they grow their practice 10, 15,000 or whatever it was, and it bumps up and it gets comfortable for them, right? It's when the big idea, when they discover who they are, who they can be, what they're meant for, all of a sudden that 30,000, doesn't it happen, Tara? It goes from 30,000 to 60 and 70 and 80,000, right? And we got so many $1 million a year practices inside of AMC. They're riddled throughout AMC. But none of those people that I can think of that are like that, they're not doing it for the money.
And you don't stay that way for long if that is the reason.
That's right.
It's staying power.
Well, Dr. Tara, I don't even think we did a launch into this show. I certainly didn't give you an opportunity to give a shout out. Do you want to give a quick shout out before I wrap up the show?
Yeah, I want to give a quick shout out to Doctors Blake and Evelyn Smith. I don't know how quick it's going to be, but I remember she was a student from Parker back 3-4 years ago, something like that. Came to her first summit in Kansas City, brought Dr. Blake with her before they were married. And I
remember that.
It was quite the weekend. They'll laugh when they hear that, but I'm really just so proud of them. They purchased a practice out in Oklahoma, and they have already surpassed, I think, their best month ever, or at least they're on their way to their best month ever. So really excited for them, and just what's coming down the road, because again, that's not just about them. That's not their motivation, right? That's not their money is not their motivation, but they have a little one, Liam, that they have big plans for. And I'm so excited to see how those changes that they're making, not just in their practice, but in themselves, are going to trickle down to that little guy's life forevermore.
Everyone listening, your potential is greater than your concepts of today. Now, if you want to write that down real quick as we wrap the show up, pull over to the side of the road and write that down. Everyone listening, your potential is greater than your concepts of today. Just because you don't understand it, that's what a concept is understanding, doesn't mean the potential is not real. And potential, your potential, is truth in waiting. So as we've described these people that, Blake and Evelyn Smith, their practice has exploded and grown, but yet they have so much more potential.
Mm-hmm.
And when they hit it, when the day they're walking in that, are they going to be able to say, I never had the potential to begin with? No, it was always there. We can see it. That's the gift that you and I have. We're able to look at people and see it in their eyes. We can see the potential that they can't see themselves. So I want you to remember that, folks. Your concepts, continue to stretch those concepts, stretch those understandings of why things work, and understanding and get your concepts wrapped around, well, what's your purpose and what's your true motivation? Dr. Tara, didn't know you were going to have us crying today.
Well, you should have known.
Yeah, of all people that were going to come in here and do that would be you. But I appreciate you, and I love and appreciate you and your heart.
Appreciate you as well.
And all that you bring to chiropractic each and every day. So with that, folks, we're going to wrap it up, and we will talk to you on the next episode. Appreciate you. God bless.
Follow our show. You can share it with friends, of course, and we'd love for you to contact us at mailbag@amcfamily.com. In addition, you're always invited to attend or join us at a summit. Of course, registration is required. And we would love for you to check out the loads of free content we provide to social media every single week. Until next time.